Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. Today, we have Beth Carroll, the owner of the Prosperio Group. Beth, I'm so excited to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Spencer. It's good to be here.
Well, before we heat things up, just take 30 seconds. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing over there at the Prosperio Group.
Yep. So I am a compensation consultant. People don't realize that that is actually a thing, but there are probably about 150 or so compensation consultants worldwide that really focus on incentive comp design specifically. I've been doing it for 25 years. I started with a big HR consulting firm, and then in 2008 left to basically start my own company. Developed a niche focusing on transportation and logistics companies. And so now I've worked with over 300 transportation and logistics companies, helping them develop incentive compensation plans. So it's basically anytime you want to use pay for performance or create a variable compensation system to align performance and rewards, I'm the one who would come in and help you figure out how to do that.
Beth, you have an amazing gift and so much knowledge in this area. So let's jump right in here. 2020, 2021, just your ordinary years as it relates to labor and whatnot.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, what in the world? Can you unpack what has changed in the last 12 months specifically when it comes to compensation strategies?
Pretty much everything. I mean, if you had asked me in 2019, could I have predicted anything that was going to happen in 2020? I couldn't have, and I don't think anybody else could have. But even facing a global pandemic, I don't know that we would have anticipated the impact that would have had on labor. So, in terms of now people, we've had the great, what are they calling it? The great resignation, right? Where everybody's basically quitting. Pay rates have gone up. I'm telling my clients to just budget, if they haven't already increased their salaries, to just budget a 10% increase. So, which a lot of people get kind of all freaked out about this. But if you think about it, in 20 some years that I've been doing comp design, annual salary budgets were 2.5% to 3.5%. I mean, it would be rare if you had a year where it was a 5% increase. We know, generally speaking, a lot of things, even though the consumer price index was only going up 3% or whatever, if you look at college costs, they were going up far faster than that. If you look at a lot of other prices in the world, mortgages, rent, things like that, we're going up faster. So I think it's like this backlog that happened where salaries stayed basically flat for 10, 15 years. And now all of a sudden it's released and they are now catching up. So I don't really think it's quite as catastrophic as some people make it out to be. I think it's more like a correction that's happening, but we are definitely seeing more pay increases in 2021, and I'm sure it's going to continue in 2022 than I had ever experienced in 25 years of being a compensation consultant.
How much of those pay increases are scheduled versus a preemptive defense to try to keep somebody from being a flight risk?
It's not so much that it's that I see people doing it to keep people from leaving. They're doing it because they can't hire anybody. Right. So that's the main reason, is they're just not getting people to come in the front door with offering them what they had been offering them in the past. So if people are going to leave, the old adage is, right, people join a company for the compensation, they leave because of management. That's still true, right? If somebody likes where they are working, they can overlook a lot of discrepancy in terms of compensation. It's going to take a big increase from somebody else to make them leave a place that they feel comfortable with, that they like their managers, they feel, a sense of satisfaction from the work they do. So it's really, if you've got a good environment to begin with, then you really shouldn't have to overcompensate to get people to stay. You have to make sure you pay them fairly, of course, and that they, are getting rewarded for doing a good job, but you really shouldn't have to overcompensate. It's just bringing people in the door in the first place. Now, keep in mind that as you raise people's salaries for new people that are coming in the door, that creates something called compression. And it means you need to look at who you have inside and make sure that they are now not paid less than the new people that are coming in. So raising the rates for new people does mean you're going to have to raise the rates for your people inside as well.
And that's not a small thing in terms of depending on how many equivalent positions that you have at that person that you're bringing in.
Yep.
And I've heard a lot of that. So we talk about just more money in the pot, more money, but that's not the whole story. What are how have the characteristics of the overall compensation packages evolved in the last 12 months?
Another big shift that I've seen happen, particularly in the freight broker world, is finally, and I've been saying they needed to do this for years, finally a move away from pure commission, right? So getting more into having a salary plus commission or a salary plus goal-based incentive or something else, because it's now reached the point where if you're trying to pay a draw, you can't set the commission rate high enough to cover the initial salary that people have to get them in the door and have any sort of reasonable economics at the back end of this, right? So it's much better to have a reasonable salary amount, which in Chicago these days is going to be somewhere around 50, 55,000 for entry level, somebody coming in. And then a commission on top of that after somebody has cleared a threshold, but not connecting it to that salary. The connection to that salary, as the salary goes higher, it creates the pressure to have a higher commission rate, which then you're paying out way too much for somebody who's a superstar performer. So I'm really glad to see that change finally happening, that companies are really realizing that it's like, look, you may think you're saving money by paying 100% commission plan, but you're actually not. You're giving away more at the top end than you really need to.
No, it's really interesting color there. So you said finally twice. So what was the hesitancy on the ownership side to not go there sooner? What's been holding them back?
Perception, I think. So people feel like that it's economically sensible to completely share the risk with an employee. And I'm talking here about like carrier sales or your sales rep. I'm not talking about somebody in accounting, right? That they would say, look, if I pay somebody a 25% commission, my costs are guaranteed, right? It's like, I know it's only going to ever cost me 25% of the margin to have that person in the role. If I pay somebody a salary, what if they don't produce enough to cover their salary? Then I'm losing money, right? So that's the concern with that's their mindset of, why do I not want to have a salary? They feel like at the bottom end, they're going to be losing money. But what they don't realize is employees will take fixed pay, right? So they want to have that guarantee of that fixed pay in exchange for maybe having a 10% commission instead of a 25% commission. So yes, would it cost you more if you paid a salary plus a 25% commission? Absolutely. But that's usually not what we're going for. We're going for a salary plus a lower commission rate. And in the end, if you've got somebody, once they're clearing their salary, it saves the business money to do that, right? You can still have escalating commissions. You can still pay a lot to people. I'm not saying don't pay top performers a lot, but you don't need to pay top performers 25%.
I'm interested because some people that understand the game on the employee side, they want the straight commission because they understand that I'm going to win.
Right.
When it's all said and done, they're confident in their positions. Now, where our worlds intersect, particularly on the freight brokerage side, is when it comes to business valuation. And some of these comp structures significantly influence how a company will be valued in an open market. To what degree is ownership and the employees on either side of the table thinking about business value when they're thinking about these compensation strategies?
I don't think they're thinking about it as much as they should, right? And so you and I have both seen situations where an acquiring company was trying to buy one of these companies that had a bad compensation plan, and it actually decreased the value that the sellers got for selling their company because of the compensation plan. So I think it really does need to be considered. If you've got a situation that where your compensation plan is preventing you from managing your top performers, right? So if you've got top performers who won't come into the office, who aren't participating in team meetings, who are just sort of like off doing their own thing and not following anything about your culture, and you feel like you can't corral them because they own the biggest accounts and the way you've paid them and everything, that's an indication that you are probably not going to get top value when you try to sell your company. Because what company is going to come in and buy that nightmare, right? You've got a handful of people that have 80% of your accounts wrapped up with them, and they're prima donnas, and you're paying them over $500,000 a year, or sometimes it's over $1 million a year. No acquirer is going to want to deal with that. You've created a mess that you're tolerating, but nobody else is going to want to.
I think it's interesting. One of the big trends that I see happening within the freight brokerage side has to do with non-competes. And, some of these agreements can be quite restrictive to people who are just employees and that want to change a career. What do you see happening there as it relates to the way that people are crafting these compensation packages, particularly for the producers?
I don't know if you saw, there was a LinkedIn post recently. I forget who did it, but there was a post. It was somebody who had a deck of cards and said, for everybody, bring us your non-competes or whatever. And they're not getting, it was like a play on Uno or something like that. But I thought it was a really good post about, non-competes are an indication that the company has something that they're scared of losing, right?
Right.
That they know they are not taking care of their employees so that their employees don't want to leave. I think I'm of the mindset that it shouldn't be necessary. You should be creating an environment where your employees are happy to stay with you. And, and I draw a difference between you should not be leaving a company and then coming and soliciting the employees that work at the company, right? That's a different thing. But not being able to maintain a relationship with a customer, I think that is sketchy, right? I think there's a lot of outside of the US, non-competes generally speaking aren't legal. Like you can't make it so that people can't work in their chosen profession. And that's what a lot of these non-competes specifically do, right? If you have a narrow definition of you can't call on accounts for, the accounts that you've specifically worked with for a couple of years, that's kind of a different thing. But some of the non-competes say you can't work in the industry, you have to be completely out of it. I mean, those are just ridiculous.
No, man, really interesting. I know Steam Logistics, maybe that's one of the ones.
I think it was Steam.
They're extremely, often one of the fastest growing freight brokerage companies in America, but very vocal about a non-compete culture.
Yep.
And obviously you can see how that's working over there. So let me ask you this. You've seen obviously 300 transportation companies alone. Tell me about a time, maybe over the last 24 months, where you came across someone where they just had great intentions, but they just kind of had their compensation strategy backwards. What happened on their journey to get to a place where they were a healthier business, that they were attracting the right talent? What were some of the adjustments that they made to mature as an organization in that area?
One of the key moments that I think comes in maturity is when they realize they've got a need for different roles. So it's actually an org structure realization before it's a comp realization. And the place that it happens first is when a company confronts the need for account managers. So they're used to having hunter sales reps. And then they realize they need some sort of more of an strategic account maintenance. I'm not talking about customer service. I'm not talking about order takers. I'm talking about somebody that is interacting with an existing account at a very high level, very strategic, ongoing type relationship, proactively, not reactively, trying to deepen the relationship with that account. And then realizing that you can't pay those people as if they are hunters, right? It's an entirely different ball game when you're paying a consultative farmer, is typically what that's referred to. And I don't mean that at all pejoratively. I always say farmers are like hunters. They're just hunting at the zoo. So when people disparage farmers, I think they're misunderstanding the role, right? So the way it really should be, it should be proactive. It should be strategic. It should be the people that are responsible for your biggest relationships. And so when companies realize those types of roles are better paid using what I call a goal-based incentive plan and not a commission, that's sort of like one of the first moments that companies go, oh, okay, I get it. There's a different thing going on here. It's okay to use a commission when you're talking about a level playing field, hunting kind of activities where it's all going after brand new customers and, everybody's starting from the same starting point, ground zero. When people are being given accounts, it's not the same thing, right? So you're giving accounts and you expect something very different from that person. You expect them to grow it. You expect them to do service level improvements with the customer, maybe increase gross margin percentage, get additional lanes, locations, participate in the bid for next year. You have a very different set of expectations for that role. And so immature companies might see that and say, okay, well, then that's just like a second-class citizen in our organization, right? They're just going to treat those people like they're just, a cost, and they're not as valuable as salespeople. Mature organizations recognize that you need to have, it's almost like a three-pronged stool in brokerage. You need to have the hunter, you need to have the farmer, the account management, strategic account management role, and you need to have carrier sales. And all three of them are equally valuable. It's not that the hunter is the superstar and everybody else is just supporting.
No, I think that is such great commentary on that issue. Now, to put that in place on that three-pronged approach, you got to have a talent strategy. So for the managers watching this right now, what are the trends that they need to know and be aware of as we're getting deeper into 22 about the things that could dramatically affect compensation and pay for the employees that they're trying to attract?
Well, flexibility, right? So I think flexibility is going to continue to be the watchword. And I think organizations that are trying to hold a hard line on everybody has to come back into the office are fooling themselves. This is not something, I think that at least for the foreseeable future, I think the days of management being able to dictate to employees things that they used to consider to be just standard, like, yes, you're supposed to be in the office. I think those days are gone. I think employees right now have a lot more power, and they know they have the power. They have the ability to choose. They have the ability to maybe go do something on their own. The gig economy has created all kinds of different options for people who don't want to be under management's thumb. So I would say it's not even so much a compensation thing, right? As it is just recognizing, well, maybe it is compensation. If you broaden the definition of compensation to total rewards, it's recognizing that what employees want from a total rewards package is very different than what it was even, 10, 15 years ago, let alone going back to the 70s or 60s or something like that. It's not just so much about cash is king. For a few people, it always will be. There will always be some what I call never enough hunters out there. And for those people, you're right, cash is king, and they're going to want that, 25% commission for forever. The vast majority of people are looking for flexibility. They're looking for work-life balance. They're looking for appreciation. They're looking for career advancement. They're looking for being challenged, right? And having mental engagement in their work. These are not things that come easy to freight brokers or even asset-based trucking companies, right? There's stress in the job, but once somebody has mastered the job, I don't know that there's a lot of ongoing challenge to it. So managers are going to have to think about how do they create career paths for people so that they have a way to advance and stay mentally engaged and not just get burned out. It's not going to be enough to just say, okay, I'm collecting a paycheck. No, they want more.
No, I 100% agree. So one more question, then I'll throw you a little wild card there, Beth. So of all the potential positions that management might address within a freight brokerage in 2022, what is the one position that you think if they only adjusted one compensation, what do you think is the one position within those companies that they just got to button down and update and refresh to be competitive for the future?
Carrier sales. If they have a split model, right? So when I talk about my three-pronged stool, that's like the classic Chicago split model. Not everybody has it. Some people still do like a cradle to grave kind of model, in which case then they've got one role, so fix that role. If you have a split model, I think carrier sales is probably the most important one. Now, I have seen more bad comp design around the hunter or the hunter farmer type role where you're going out and you're soliciting shippers, and then you've got some ongoing responsibility for managing the customer relationship. That's where things can get supremely out of whack in terms of pay. But usually, this is kind of a broad statement, but there are typically more carrier sales resources in an organization than there are customer sales resources. Depends a bit on what's happening with freight market. But I would say in 2021, given the scarcity of capacity, that is definitely true, right? So keeping the people who are finding your capacity engaged and motivated, I think is going to be critical.
That's such a timely word of wisdom there. So let me ask you a little wild card question. We've talked about this in the past. What, prior to your career in the compensation strategy world, what was one, I guess, other field that other people wouldn't know about you that maybe you had a different type of expertise in?
I feel like this is a setup. Were you on my bio? Yeah. So some people know that before getting into the business world, I actually did a master's degree in comparative religions at the University of Chicago Divinity School. And I did 2 years of doctorate work in historical biblical criticism. So it's not that I was trying to be in the seminary or trying to become a minister. I actually had more of an academic interest in it. And my intention was to become a college professor. So I was hoping that I would end up teaching, intro to religion, intro to the Bible. When I went to Bucknell, that was where all the kind of fun classes were. So like gender studies and the civil rights movement and all those sort of, I guess they'd call them woke classes now. That's where they was in the religion department. And I just thought it was really neat. Also, I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to study. I liked sort of all liberal arts. And when you study religion, you have to study literature and philosophy and sociology and history and art. And, it's sort of this all-encompassing liberal arts thing. And so that's what I wanted to do. I just kind of made a mistake about where I went to graduate school because University of Chicago is a fantastic institution. Top the year that I went there, it was better than Harvard. I was accepted to Harvard, but I went to University of Chicago. And they just don't teach people to teach. They teach people to do research. And so I realized that there was sort of a fundamental misalignment between what I wanted to do and where they were sending me on the path that I was on, and that I wasn't going to end up being happy if I did that. So now I spend my time teaching about compensation. So I still get to teach.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And what I gathered from that, and for you listeners, is that when Beth is giving you compensation strategies, they're coming from a holy power. So
I don't think I'd claim that.
That's my take on that little tidbit there. Well, listen, Beth, I love it when we get to connect. I learn so much when we're having these conversations. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat today. Thank you so much for being with us. We will see you next time.